I'm Charlotte Mitchell, Chair of the Utilities Commission, and with me this morning are Commissioners Clodfelter, Hughes, McKissick, and Kimmerite. In compliance with State Government Ethics Act, I remind members of the Commission of our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and inquire at this time as to whether any member of the Commission has a known conflict with respect to matters coming before us. The record will reflect that no conflicts have been identified, so we will proceed with Public Staff. Item 1.
Good morning. I'm David Williamson with the Public Staff's Energy Division. Item 1 is an application filed by Piedmont Natural Gas requesting approval of rates for its annual energy efficiency rider effective for the calendar year 2023. Public Staff has reviewed the application and supplemental information provided during the review process, which updated the actual expenses through September 2022. As a result, the Public Staff recommends that the Commission approve the updated rates as presented in the Public Staff's comments and proposed order.
Approval is recommended by the public staff. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that the item be approved as recommended by the Public Staff. Are there any questions or discussion on that motion? All right, hearing none, all in favor indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Williamson.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on now to Public Staff Item 2.
Good morning. I am Sashi Bhatta with the engineer with the Public Staff Water, Sewer, and Telephone Division. Item number 2 is docket number W661 sub 10 and W-1341 sub 0. Farrington Utilities LLC and Fitch Creations Inc. doing business as Farrington Utilities filed an application for authority to transfer the wastewater utility system and public utility franchise for providing wastewater utility service in Farrington Village subdivision in Chatham County, North Carolina, from Fitch Creations to Farrington Utilities and approval of rates. No customer submitted any statements in protest of the transfer. The Public Staff has reviewed the application and recommends that the Commission issue the proposed order approving the transfer and the approval of rates.
Approval is recommended by the public staff. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that the item be approved as recommended by the Public Staff. Questions or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Vada. All right, the Commission has before us for approval our minutes from the November 28th staff conference.
Second.
All right, questions or discussion on the motion or the minutes? All right, hearing none, all in favor indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? All right, those minutes are approved. All right, before we adjourn this morning, it's my understanding that Duke is here to present the Commission with an update on the situation in Moore County.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Kendall Bowman, VP Regulatory Affairs and Policy for Duke Energy. This morning, I'd like to introduce 3 people from Duke Energy to go over and highlight the events that happened at Moore County last week. We have with us Bonnie Titone, who is Senior VP and Chief Information Officer, Sam Holman, who's VP of System Planning and Ops, and then Rodney Hutcherson, VP of Construction and Maintenance for the company.
All right, thank you, Ms. Bowman.
I'll go ahead and get started with a summary of kind of how this played out on December the 3rd. So between 1930 and about 2028, this is 7:30 p.m., 8:30 p.m. on the 3rd of December, the Duke Energy Progress Energy Control Center began getting alarms that indicated to us that there were abnormal conditions at the west end of the Carthage substations in Moore County. These indications informed us that there was equipment in the substation that was no longer operable, and it resulted in the loss of about 100 megawatts, which translates to about 45,000 customers out in Moore County. Our NERC certified system operators in the Energy Control Center here in DEP do what we trained them to do. They assess, they evaluate, and then they respond. And so there was parallel paths, simultaneous activities taking place. One was looking at the event in Moore County from a what is happening perspective. And so in that particular situation, given lessons learned from prior events across the country, obviously we had a situation where we had equipment that needed field performers to get out there. And so we got our construction and maintenance teams en route dispatched to go to the substations of Moore County. And then because of the proximity of the two substations, approximately 11 to 12 miles, we also called our Enterprise Protective Services teammates to go out there and assess the situation from that perspective. So we had two separate groups of system operators working on this. One was the event in Moore County. The other was there an impact to the broader system from this situation in Moore County? And as we looked at it, and this is a 24/7/365 job in the energy control centers, we determined that the events in Moore County did not at any point threaten the eastern interconnection or the broader system. Our system operators in our ECC use tools, they use information from our supervisory control and data acquisition systems to evaluate that continuously. And we determined this did not at any point pose an electrical threat to the broader eastern interconnection. From a reliability, electrical reliability and electrical stability perspective, and that means from keeping equipment in limits, that's reliability, electrical reliability. Electrical stability is making sure that the system is pre-positioned to be able to land reliably within its limits when these unforeseen contingencies happen. So that analysis continued with that group of system operators. And so as the teams from Duke Energy arrived at the sites, it was determined that the damaged equipment could not in its current state be used to provide service to the customers. And so we developed tactical plans on how to get those customers in Moore County back to service. And I say this in fully recognizing that while it wasn't an event that impacted the broader grid, this is certainly an event that impacted our customers in Moore County. Many of the men and women who are working this job 24/7 live in that county, and so they were affected by it directly. So we had these two parallel paths activities going. Our team on the ground determined that we could move equipment to the location to support restoration of our customers. There was a block of customers that were restored on Monday the 5th, and the last of the customers were restored on Wednesday the 7th. So that's the way this event kind of transpired from a response perspective in both the field organizations in Enterprise Protective Services and the energy control centers here in Raleigh.
All right, thank you, Mr. Holman. Anything that you all would like to add?
Yeah, I thought I would just spend just 2 minutes talking about just the security component, the physical security components of it from a grid perspective. Obviously, we recognize that, protecting the grid is number one for us and paramount to what we're doing. We think about that in 4 ways or, across 4 things. It's securing our foundation. So that's the physical defenses that we have on the ground. It's defending our assets. So this is this 24/7 team that Sam was mentioning that does a lot of the response and the monitoring to any of these situations. It's the partnership with our industry and whether it's federal, state, government partners as it relates to information sharing, which you saw quite a bit of that very quickly once we got into this situation. And then it's preparedness to respond, which if you think about this particular instance, we had to tap into all 4 of those in order to actually do the response that Sam was talking through. So where we're at right now, we are continuing to coordinate with Moore County and Ridgeway, South Carolina, where the second incident was, with both federal, state, and local law enforcement as they work through this. The FBI is taking lead on that investigation. We are collaborating with them on a daily basis in order to ultimately figure out who was the culprit for this particular situation. And it has the utmost attention on the senior leadership level of Duke Energy.
And one thing I'll add. So as we were evaluating this situation, there's fundamentals that our operators and our field performers, both in construction and maintenance and in security, will never compromise. One, safety. And when you look at what had to be done to get this repairs done, you're talking about moving equipment, components of the systems that were damaged that weigh well over a ton. So there's heavy rigging and hauling ramifications to that. It's safety of our own performers. It's also safety of the public. We won't compromise that. And then the other component is we want to do it right the first time. We want to be event-free in this. We train our operators to be diligent, to be disciplined, to be methodical, and to be cautious. And that cuts across all 3 of our groups here. We don't want to make a mistake and have to start over and delay the restoration to our customers. So that those fundamentals provide the platform from which we operate on and deal with the situation at hand.
All right, thank you, Mr. Holman, for that additional. Looks like I have some questions from commissioners, but I want to ask you a few first, just based on things that you've said this morning. So you indicated that the loss of load was about 100 megawatts, representing that, and roughly 45,000 customers lost service. Did I understand that correctly?
That is great. That is what we assessed at the time.
Okay.
On Saturday evening.
On Saturday. Help me understand how quickly did this happen? I mean, I understand that the equipment was vandalized and then was loss of service to those affected customers almost immediate.
So I think Mr. Hutchinson can respond to the actual details. From the ECC side, we got alarms starting at about quarter to 8 Saturday night, and they ran till about 20 after 8 Saturday night.
All right, the detail was that Carthage substation tripped out approximately at 1912
Okay.
on Saturday evening.
Okay.
The other West End substation tripped out at 2036 is the last item that we had trip out. At 2117, another substation, because of the damage that was sustained, we tripped it out ourselves.
I gotcha.
It would cause damage to the equipment if we had not. So approximately from 1912 to 2117 was the entire customer loss event.
Okay. So during that time, customers were losing service.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Mr. Holman, you touched on this, but I'm hoping you can speak in more detail about the work that the company had to do to restore service. You mentioned the equipment that was involved here. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, well, there were components that were massive, as you've described. I think you said in excess of a ton that had to be taken off the system, and then replacement equipment brought and installed where the damaged equipment had come out. Can you help us understand, just provide a little bit more detail about that equipment and the nature of the work in which you all had to engage?
Yeah, I would ask Mr. Hutchinson.
Okay.
There was a lot of equipment damaged. I think we appreciate the question, but there's a lot of investigation going on from a federal level, and we probably would like not to comment on it at this time until they have a little more time to assess the culprit that did this.
Okay. All right. Ms. Titone, you mentioned a second incident in, I think you said Ridgeway, South Carolina. Does the company have any, recognizing that there are investigations ongoing, but is there any reason to believe that this incident is connected to the Moore County incident?
We're cooperating with, as I mentioned, law enforcement around it. The initial feedback from them was that it is not related
Okay.
Incident, but we certainly are going to continue to participate in both of those investigations and let the law enforcement come up with their findings around it.
Okay. All right. Let me check in with my fellow commissioners. Commissioner McKissick.
Sure. First, I'd like to thank you for providing us with this information this morning. I guess I have several questions. First of all, how many similar substations, if you know, exist in North Carolina today?
I think we have that.
Yeah, I've tried to just to give you,
Approximate is fine.
well, I would say similar substations. If you're talking to the south, we have approximately 2,100 substations in North Carolina. They're a mix of transmission substations, which or transmission to distribution, and steps down the voltage to a distribution level. We can break that down, but it'll take me a little bit to look at it.
Sure. And based upon what happened in Moore County, are there any measures that Duke is evaluating that would minimize the risk of a similar type of physical threat in the future?
Yeah, that's certainly something that we're looking at. We're going to take the lessons learned out of this and come up with an action plan, but it's just too early to talk about the details associated to that plan.
Well, I think that would be very helpful and insightful to know what plan might look like to mitigate these risks. But equally important is the potential cost, because whatever that cost would be would have to be paid or for eventually by customers. And while I know that you can sometimes improve a situation so that you decrease vulnerability, I think what the cost would be of substantial concern. Now, in terms of the type of attack that occurred, does it appear that the person or persons that might have been involved had some type of unique knowledge relating to the operations of these substations?
Right now, we obviously, because of the investigations going on, we don't want to speculate or talk publicly about that. It's certainly something that they're using in that investigation, which I can tell you is ongoing and thorough and being done thoroughly. So I don't want to speculate on that particular project.
Sure. And Bonnie, I want to thank you for all the times you've been before us in the past relating to security-related issues. And I know you were there when GridX was done last November and the tabletop exercise this past July. And I think it's excellent that Duke Energy goes through those operations to think about what happens when there's some type of attacks, whether it's a cyber attack or, a physical attack like this one, or even insider threats that can be minimized. But based upon what you have observed in Moore County, are there any things that you might do in the future related to those exercises that would help you better prepare for what we saw take place?
Yeah, I think like always, we take learnings as threats change throughout the year. We have to change our strategy in order to handle any of those incoming or emergent threats. I think this would be no different. We would take information into that and reassess how we're doing, whether it's our business continuity planning or our exercises. So we would take any of those learnings and modify our strategy going forward.
And the last question is simply this, and I know it may be too early to know, but do we know what kind of costs were incurred relating to, going in there and repairing or replacing the equipment there in Moore County to get some idea of what this particular, and for lack of a better word, I'm going to say attack, is going to cost Duke and cost the ratepayers at some point in the future? Are there any numbers that you're free to discuss at this time or could share with us later?
We're still trying to assess all the costs. We moved pretty rapidly to get the customers restored. And we have some time later in the week to discuss how much exactly it costs.
That would be appreciated if you could share that with us. And I'm very pleased that Duke, went in there and it got things done very expeditiously to minimize the inconvenience to those warrior customers, and you even got the power on about at least half a day earlier than anticipated. So despite the fact that people were without power for as long as they were, I appreciate the fact that it was taken very seriously and that the problems were resolved as expeditiously as possible. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Kleinfelter.
Thank you. I join Commissioner McKissick. I know we all do, in our gratitude for how quickly you jumped on this and how quickly you've gotten it under control. I have one question. You, in addition to the 2 substations that were damaged, you indicated that you had to de-energize a third. My question was that done to protect the equipment at that third substation, or was it done to prevent the disruption from spreading elsewhere through the grid?
We de-energized, it was on the same side as at the substations that was damaged.
Okay.
But we did de-energize it to prevent further damage or potential damage to the equipment that was affected.
To that particular substation,
Yes.
It wasn't
Yes.
essential to prevent that. It was on the same.
It was on. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
got it. Thanks.
That's fine.
All right, any additional questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Hughes.
Yeah, I'll throw my huge thanks to you all as well. Understanding that, excuse me, understanding your first priority was your own assets. Could you comment at all now or maybe follow up later about steps that this activated to coordinating with other groups in Moore County? I think we learned in Texas how interconnected all the utilities, and I have a personal interest in the water utilities that might have been affected. While you had certain teams doing what you've laid out, were there other actions taken to contact water utilities, contact municipalities, figure out kind of coordinating that that you can talk about?
Well, the response immediately was when the event occurred. The two responses that we had was to get electricians and substation technicians to the site. We also, of course, Moore County law enforcement was there very quickly, if not before we were in a lot of cases. We then we worked with our governmental affairs and community relations folks to make sure the communication was out. I really don't know who all, I think they contacted quite a few folks as part of this. But from my standpoint, what I was focused on was ensuring that we got the equipment repaired as quickly as possible. Of course, we involved transmission department involved our customer delivery organization, and they communicated that the outage restoration times that we felt like, and it's communicated to all the stakeholders that we are involved with in that area. I really don't know how many other I think the community relations folks, and I'll have to let somebody else answer that, contacted all of the water resources folks and the government and the emergency response folks.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I figured it might be someone else in the organization, but as we're all trying to learn as much as we can from this, I personally would be interested in just, how that worked. What were some of the secondary impacts of this? And again, particularly in other essential utilities like water. I'm not sure if there's any gas assets in Moore County that weren't impacted at all as well.
During the week, there were several gatherings or conferences with the Moore County leadership, which included all the folks you're referencing, the mayors of Moore County, the school systems, the water forms, the law enforcement and emergency management we were all together discussing the progress and status of what was going on throughout the entire county.
Thank you for that.
All right, one last question for you all. Mr. Holman, you described sort of two teams of system operators responding to this incident. And Ms. Titone, I assume one of those teams is yours, the Enterprise Security Group. Can you just confirm for us that at this point in time, your group has done what it needs to do to determine, one, whether there were any other risk to the system or threat to the system associated with the Moore County event, and that if there were, that it's been neutralized at this point in time?
Yeah, we took a bunch of measures once obviously our first goal was to get there and get that site secure so that we can bring in people from Sam's team and Rodney's team in order to make sure they can work safely to do the restoration. And then we took that and broadened that out to the other locations around there to make sure that we were doing, the observations and things of that nature to secure our other sites as well. So I would say we work actively doing that. We have not stood any of that activity down at this point.
Okay. So at this point in time, I'm understanding from you all that all customers have been restored to service. Were restored by the 7th, though some of them were restored. Many of them were restored prior to that date, and that any threat has been neutralized, or at least you all are continuing to monitor. Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else that you all think we should know before we conclude this morning? Okay. Well, I want to express to you our appreciation for your work in responding to this incident and leading the groups that you all have to lead to fix the problems that were caused and to return these customers to service. I can imagine that it was a very scary situation for those customers down in Moore County to go through. So I want to thank you all for we're getting them back online relatively quickly in light of what happened. And I want to thank you for coming here today and spending your time updating us so that we are assured that the system is stable at this point, and that you all are actively working with law enforcement to determine what's happened. So thank you again for your work. Please express our appreciation to your teams as well, because I know this has been an effort that was forced upon you all, and you all have responded well. So thank you. With that, you all may step down. Let me check in and see if there's anything else for the commission this morning before we adjourn. All right, I'm not hearing anything, so we will be adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Let's go off the record, please.